Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're basically going to tear the fig leaf completely off the stock market. If you're tuning in hoping for comfortable lies or, a get-rich-quick scheme, honestly, this isn't for you. But if you actually want to understand how the financial markets really operate, and more importantly, protect the money you've worked so incredibly hard to earn, you absolutely need to hear this. The material we're looking at today takes a stark, uncompromising look at investing. It argues that the market is just a completely cutthroat environment, and we're going to break down exactly why that is. So let's get into some pretty revealing data. Let's think about the absolutely terrifying math of the stock market for a second. Out of every 10 ordinary retail investors jumping into the market, only one actually walks away with a profit. One! Maybe two break even, and a staggering 7 out of 10, they lose their entire principal. I mean, think about that. 90% of everyday people are essentially just throwing their money away. And you know what the real kicker is? The data makes it super clear that this massive failure rate, it has absolutely nothing to do with your intelligence, your education, or how hard you work at your day job. Literally, brilliant professors and top-tier CEOs get wiped out here every single day. So what on earth is actually going on?
Well, that brings us to Section 1, 4 Fatal Investing Habits.
To figure out why 90% of people fail, we really have to look inward. These crushing financial losses, they're not just a string of bad luck. No, they are the direct result of highly predictable, honestly kind of poisonous human flaws. So I want to ask you directly, are you committing these fatal errors? Are you actively participating in your own financial demise? Let's break down the first habit.
All right, habit number 1, treating investing like a lottery. Just think about how absurd our behavior is for a second. When you go to the grocery store to buy a cheap cabbage for a couple of bucks, you inspect it, right? You look for insect holes, you check for rotten leaves, you might even complain about the price. If you're buying a TV, you probably spend hours comparing screen sizes and warranties online. But when everyday folks enter the stock market, it's wild. They'll throw thousands of dollars, sometimes their entire life savings at a company without even knowing what that company actually sells. They're buying a complete black box just because, they heard a rumor from a buddy or saw a screenshot of someone else making money online. Honestly, that's not investing. That's just throwing your cash into a fire with your eyes tightly shut.
And that blind gambling? It directly fuels habit number 2, chasing high prices out of pure FOMO, the fear of missing out. See, when a stock is cheap and actually has value, nobody is talking about it. But the second it doubles or triples in price, bam, it hits the news and suddenly everyone is rushing in. But buying at the peak is literally like waiting in line for 3 hours in the blistering sun for that trendy new restaurant. By the time it's finally your turn to sit down, all the good food has already been eaten by the people who got there early. You are just there to take over their losses. Essentially, you're paying a premium just for the privilege of washing their dishes. Rough, right?
Now, habit number 3 is what we call playing dead. This happens all the time. An investor buys a stock. It drops 10%. And instead of just admitting they made a mistake, they hold on to it. They're hoping it bounces back. Then it drops 20%, then 40%. Eventually, they just delete their investing app and pretend the money never existed in the first place. The metaphor here is spot on. It's like holding onto an apple with a massive rotting hole in it, just hoping it's going to magically heal itself. Spoiler alert, it won't. It's just going to rot the entire basket. If you stubbornly hold on to a sinking ship without plugging the hole, it's eventually going to drag your entire portfolio right down to the bottom.
And finally, we have habit number 4, frequent trading. A lot of retail investors get this idea that if they just stare at the screen all day long, buying today and selling tomorrow to lock in some tiny 2% profit, they're being, diligent. But here's the reality. Constant buying and selling just triggers massive handling fees and taxes. It's exactly like taking a giant block of ice and passing it back and forth between your bare hands. Sure, you feel super busy and you think you're accomplishing something big, but with every single pass, every single transaction, that ice melts just a little bit more. After a year, you look down and your principal has completely evaporated into a literal puddle of transaction fees.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the wealth transfer machine. So think about it. If ordinary people are losing all this money because of these bad habits, where exactly is that money going? Uncovering this reveals basically the darkest secret of the financial world. The stock market is not some magical money printing machine where we all hold hands and get rich together as the economy grows. It's just not. It's actually a massive, ruthless wealth transfer machine. It is a zero-sum battlefield. If you log into your account and see you're down 20 grand, that money didn't just vanish into thin air. Somewhere in the world, someone else just made 20 grand off your mistake. And honestly, they're probably popping champagne right now. It's a direct transfer of wealth from the impatient and undisciplined straight to the incredibly patient and cold-blooded.
So, who exactly are these people you're transferring your hard-earned wealth to? Well, on one side of the table, you have the ordinary investor, probably trading on a phone that lags half the time, using the, 30 minutes of free time they have after work. But on the other side, sitting right across that poker table are institutional giants. We are talking about massive financial groups armed with supercomputers doing millions of calculations a second. They employ the world's top math geniuses, and they literally rent satellites in space to track the exact number of delivery trucks leaving a factory. No joke.
Trying to compete against these institutions on information or technology? It's utterly futile. It is quite literally like holding a rusty kitchen knife to fight a squad rolling up in heavy tanks. But here's the craziest part. Their real weapon isn't even their tech. It's their mastery of your psychology. These guys are apex predators, and they engineer the market. They use their massive capital to artificially pump up prices, sparking these positive news cycles just to make you greedy. Once you rush in and buy, boom, they dump their shares right onto you, crashing the price. Then they release bad news to stir up panic, forcing you to sell at rock bottom, so they can swoop in and buy those shares back for pennies. They are manipulating your emotions to literally steal your chips off the table.
Which brings us to Section 3, 7 Rules for Survival.
Okay, I know the whole institutional tanks thing sounds incredibly bleak, but don't worry, we can learn to dodge these traps and actually protect ourselves. Rule number 1 is your absolute non-negotiable foundation: preserve your principal. And to get why this is so absolutely crucial, just look at the brutal math. Let's say you have $100,000, right? And you lose 50% of it. Now you've got $50K. To get back to where you started, you don't just need a 50% gain. No, you need a 100% gain just to break even. And let me tell you, doubling your money in the market is insanely difficult. That's exactly why you have to treat your principal like your lifeblood. Once you lose your chips, you are permanently locked out of the game.
So how do you protect that principal? You've got to follow rules 2, 3, and 4. First up, only use spare money. I'm talking about cash you definitely won't need for the next 3 to 5 years. Because if you invest your mortgage money, you're going to panic at the very first dip and make terrible emotional decisions. Second, only trade what you understand. If you buy into a business model that makes 0 sense to you, you're basically buying a black box full of rocks. And third, you have to learn to cut your losses. Setting a strict stop loss is exactly like having brakes on your car. If you realize you're speeding toward a cliff edge, you don't just close your eyes and pray the car magically sprouts wings. You slam on the brakes to save your life, even if it burns up the tires a little.
Now, Rule 5 is all about how you manage your garden. See, ordinary investors have this terrible habit of selling their winning stocks for just a tiny little profit because they're absolutely terrified of losing that gain. That is literally like walking into a beautiful garden and cutting down all the blooming flowers. Meanwhile, they stubbornly hold on to their massive, glaring losses, which is basically watering the weeds. A master investor, they do the exact opposite. They pull the weeds immediately by cutting those losses super fast, and they let the beautiful flowers grow by letting their profits run.
Rule 6 and 7, they demand absolute discipline. You have got to turn off the market noise. The 24/7 news cycle, the online forums, those hot tips from a friend. It is all specifically designed to lure you into taking over someone else's bad trade. Real, true investing is quiet. You have to cultivate this almost infinite patience. A successful investor is a lot like a hunter lying perfectly still in the bushes, or a fisherman sitting quietly on the shore. You don't jump flailing into the river to grab a fish with your bare hands, right? You wait for that perfect, low-risk opportunity to come right to you. Honestly, sometimes doing absolutely nothing is the most profitable move you can possibly make.
And finally, Section 4, conquering yourself. So look, we've talked about the charts, the math, the supercomputers, and those institutional tanks. But all of these mechanical realities circle right back to one absolutely fundamental truth. Investing is not about beating the market. It is entirely about conquering yourself. The market is essentially just this giant, ruthless mirror. It takes every single flaw in your personality, your impatience, your greed, your fear, your hesitation. It magnifies them 1,000 times over, and then it punishes you financially for them. You can't control what those institutional giants do. You definitely can't predict the future. The only thing in the entire world you can truly control are your own 2 hands when they hover over that buy or sell button. Which leaves us with this final, really critical question to think about. Will you conquer yourself, or are you just going to remain the prey? The path to financial survival isn't hidden in some secret insider tip or a get-rich-quick fantasy. It's found in pure emotional regulation, strict discipline, and finally acknowledging the brutal reality of that wealth transfer machine. If you can master your own human nature, the market can absolutely work for you. But if you can't, it will drain you dry. The choice of how you play the game from this moment forward, well, that's entirely up to you.